Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Authorities in the Australian state of New South Wales say that they are investigating the aftermath of a frightening domestic violence incident this week, one that left both a father and son in hospital after a dramatic hour-long standoff with police. The case began just before 10 a.m. on Monday, September 29th, when neighbors on Graham Street in the Sydney suburb of Varela heard desperate screams outside a local residence. When they rushed to investigate, they found 50-year-old Mustafa Birer lying in the driveway, suffering from multiple stab wounds. Mustafa, a well-known local ice cream vendor, had been stabbed 6 times in the head and upper body. One neighbor later told local media, quote, "My neighbor heard the screaming. When he came out and he saw he was on the floor, he called me and called the police, and I called the ambulance." Another described seeing Mustafa with several injuries and bleeding heavily. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes, and when they got there, they quickly realized the alleged attacker was Mustafa's own 25-year-old son, Alperin. Witnesses said Alperin had barricaded himself inside the family's home while still armed. Police established a large perimeter around the property and called in negotiators, riot police, and the dog squad. For the next hour, the neighborhood was in lockdown as authorities tried to convince Alperin to come out peacefully. Members of the public were urged to avoid the area. At around 11:10 a.m., officers made the call to storm the unit. During the confrontation, Alperin was subdued and taken into custody. He sustained injuries and was treated at the scene before being taken to a hospital under police guard. Meanwhile, Mustafa was rushed to a hospital in serious but stable condition. Doctors confirmed that his wounds, while severe, were not considered life-threatening. The violent incident shocked locals who knew the family. One resident, Mohammed Yunus, told reporters, quote, "Mustafa is a very good person. No issues, nothing. He's a nice guy, and he sells his ice cream." At the time of this recording, both Mustafa and Alperin remain in hospital as detectives continue their investigation. Police have not yet confirmed what sparked the alleged attack, but charges are expected once Alperin is released from medical care. Authorities in Japan's Ibaraki prefecture say that they have arrested a 75-year-old woman this week, following the shocking discovery of her daughter's body, which had allegedly been concealed in her home for nearly 2 decades. The case came to light on the morning of Tuesday, September 23rd, when the woman in question, identified as Keiko Mori, walked into a local police station in the town of Ami, accompanied by a relative. There, she told officers that her daughter's remains could be found in a freezer inside her kitchen. When investigators arrived at Mori's home, they were able to confirm her disturbing statements. Inside a large freezer measuring nearly 3 feet long, they found the remains of an adult woman seated upright with her body leaning forward. The body was covered with a blanket, and police noted that multiple deodorizers had been placed inside the freezer in an apparent effort to mask the smell. According to Mori, the victim was her eldest daughter, Makiko, who had been born in September of 1975. She told officers that her daughter had died approximately 20 years ago, and in order to contain the odor from her decaying body, she had purchased the freezer specifically to store it. However, forensic tests have cast doubt on Mori's account. Following an autopsy, police revealed that Makiko's cause of death appeared to be asphyxiation due to strong pressure applied to the neck. They also reported injuries to her head consistent with being struck by a blunt object. Investigators now suspect that she was strangled to death inside the family's home 2 decades earlier before being hidden in the freezer to conceal the crime. Police say the grisly secret only came to light after Mori's husband, who had been living in the house at the time of Makiko's death, passed away earlier this month. When relatives later gathered at the home, the freezer was discovered, leading to Mori's shocking admission to police. On Thursday, September 25th, Keiko Mori was formally arrested on suspicion of abandoning a corpse and was transferred to prosecutors the following day. At the time of this recording, the investigation remains ongoing as police continue to piece together the details of Makiko's death and why her body was hidden for so many years. Police in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh say that they have uncovered a chilling case of serial murder and fraud after arresting a man accused of killing multiple family members and staging their deaths as accidents in order to collect massive insurance payouts. The suspect, 50-year-old Vishal Kumar Singhal, was taken into custody on September 28th along with an alleged accomplice, Satish Kumar. Authorities say the arrests followed months of investigation, triggered when Singhal's current wife, Shreya, came forward earlier this year fearing for her life. She told police her husband was a serial killer who had already murdered his parents and a previous wife. According to investigators, Singhal's mother, Prabha Devi, was killed in 2017, with her death staged as a road accident. He then murdered his third wife, Ekta, in 2022, and his father, Mukesh Singhal, in March of 2024, again staging the cases as accidents. Each time, police say he filed large insurance claims, at one point attempting to collect on more than 60 separate policies taken out in his father's name alone. The scale of the alleged fraud stunned investigators. Despite his family's modest means, Mukesh ran a small photo studio and copy shop, while Singhal himself was unemployed. Police say the accused somehow managed the heavy premiums for insurance policies worth more than 500 million rupees, the equivalent of roughly $6 million US. After his father's death, Singhal reportedly bought multiple luxury vehicles, including a motorcycle, before selling most of them off. Investigators say at least 6 large insurance companies across the country were targeted. One of those companies, Niva Bupa, raised the alarm after detecting discrepancies in the medical records tied to Mukesh's supposed accident. Officials noted that the injuries described in the post-mortem report did not align with a typical crash. That prompted a formal police complaint, which was part of what set the wider probe in motion. Police say Singhal's total haul from his mother and wife's deaths already exceeded an additional $120,000 US. They also allege that he used fake identity documents to obtain many of the policies. Authorities believe Singhal's multiple marriages may have also been part of the scheme, with investigators suspecting he intended to repeat the pattern of marrying, murdering, and then cashing in on insurance claims. Sambal and Hapur police are now jointly investigating Singhal's ties to what they describe as a wider insurance mafia, which has allegedly killed for profit across 12 Indian states and embezzled funds equaling more than $12 million US. Police officials say over 50 people have already been jailed in related cases, and that the investigation into Vishal Singhal's role in the broader criminal network is ongoing. At the time of this recording, he remains behind bars, facing charges of murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Authorities in South Korea's North Jeolla province say that a man has been arrested in connection with an absolutely twisted crime this week, after he allegedly killed his common-law wife and successfully covered up the crime for nearly a year. According to police, the killing took place on October 21st, 2024, when the suspect, a 41-year-old referred to in local reports only by the letter A, got into an argument with his common-law wife, B, at their apartment in the city of Gunsan. Apparently, that argument was over financial losses. A had taken 50 million won, or about $36,000 US, from B's accounts for risky investments and ended up losing 80% of the money in the process. During the heated confrontation, A reportedly snapped and strangled B to death. Instead of calling for help afterwards or admitting to what he had done, though, instead, A allegedly carried out an elaborate cover-up. He wrapped B's body in a plastic bag and hid it in a kimchi fridge that he had purchased shortly after the killing. He then used B's phone to text her relatives, pretending she was alive, while keeping up with rent payments so that no one would go into the apartment. He reportedly did this all while continuing to use B's credit card and even taking out loans in her name. It gets even more twisted though, because according to local news outlets, B was not the only woman A was in a relationship with. While they were common-law partners and had that apartment where B was living for about 3 years, A also had a second unit where he lived with another woman who he'd been seeing for a decade. For months, this woman apparently had no idea what A had done. That was, until B's family started getting suspicious about her absence. After months of nothing but texts and excuses as to why she couldn't see them, they started demanding she talk to them over the phone. That's when A reportedly panicked and began pressuring his second girlfriend to impersonate B on a call with her family. She confronted A about what was happening, he confessed to the murder, and that's when everything unraveled. The woman reached out to her sister, who called the police, and on September 29th, A was arrested. Authorities found B's body still hidden in the kimchi fridge that same day. On September 30th, A appeared in court on charges of murder and abandonment of a corpse. When given the opportunity to speak, he simply said, quote, "I'm sorry." At the time of this recording, the 41-year-old remains in custody, and the case is still under investigation. Police in Thailand say a motorcycle thief was arrested this week under unusual circumstances after he was found fast asleep next to the very bike he had allegedly stolen the night before. The case began on Wednesday, September 24th, at a motorcycle repair shop in the city of Pattaya. Shop owner, 30-year-old Gunsan Papa, told police that one of his customers had left a red and white Yamaha Fino scooter with him for repairs the previous day. However, that night, at around 11 p.m., an opportunistic thief noticed the keys still in the ignition and rode off with the bike. CCTV cameras captured the moment, showing a tall man taking the motorcycle. By the next morning, though, the case had taken a strange turn. Bunsit received a tip that the missing Yamaha had been spotted in a wooded area just outside of the city. When he went to check it out, he found the stolen bike abandoned. Even more bizarre, not far away in the bushes, a man was sleeping with the motorcycle's keys still in his possession. Convinced this was the culprit, Bunsit detained him, and that's when he had called Pattaya City Police. Officers arrived shortly afterward, arrested the suspect, and collected evidence from the scene. The man's identity has not yet been released, nor have police said whether he was under the influence at the time. He's now in custody, facing further questioning and potential charges. Authorities say they are now continuing to review CCTV footage as part of the investigation. A bizarre case that police are calling the Cinderella phone snatcher has ended with a prison sentence this week after a brazen theft on the streets of London was foiled by quick-thinking members of the public. The incident began shortly before noon on August 7th, 2024, when 28-year-old Spencer Dewart was spotted riding an e-bike through central London disguised as a commuter. According to investigators, Dewart's plan was to blend in with traffic and then snatch cell phones out of the hands of unsuspecting pedestrians. CCTV cameras captured him doing just that, pulling up alongside a victim, grabbing their phone, and speeding off with it down the street. What Dewart didn't count on, however, was the swift reaction of several bystanders. As he tried to flee, one passerby tackled him to the ground while others joined in, chasing him for several blocks. In the scuffle, Dewart lost not only 3 stolen phones and his backpack, but also one of his shoes. The 28-year-old managed to get away on foot, but was later caught on camera again, this time limping down the road in just a single shoe. His piece of missing footwear would ultimately prove to be his downfall. Investigators with the Metropolitan Police collected the abandoned sneaker and submitted it for forensic testing. In what they jokingly called a Cinderella moment, forensic specialists matched Dewart's DNA to the abandoned shoe, providing the crucial evidence needed to identify and arrest him. Dewart was later tracked down in Essex and charged with 1 count of theft. He pleaded guilty in June, and on September 24, 2025, he was sentenced at Inner London Crown Court to 15 months in prison. In a statement following the sentencing, PC Jake Dean praised both the public and investigators for their work, saying, quote, "This is a fantastic result, and we put another phone snatcher behind bars. This might seem like just one phone, but this conviction shows the determination of police officers in catching phone-snatching criminals and returning devices to victims." Forensics manager Andrew Walker also highlighted the unusual DNA match, remarking, quote, "The slipper fitted our Cinderella, and we were able to bring him in before the courts." At the time of this recording, Dewart remains in custody, serving out his sentence. Authorities in Argentina say that they were investigating one of the most shocking crimes in recent memory, after 3 young women were abducted, sexually assaulted, and brutally murdered, and their horrific final moments were live-streamed on social media. The case began back on September 19th, when 15-year-old Lara Gutierrez and her friends, 20-year-old cousins Brenda del Castillo and Morena Verdi, left for what they believed was a party. Sadly, though, the truth was they had just been lured into a trap. According to investigators, the 3 victims were instead kidnapped by members of a drug trafficking organization and taken to a home in the Buenos Aires suburb of Florencio, Varela. There, they were subjected to unimaginable abuse. The situation turned even darker when members of the group decided to broadcast the violence in real time, reportedly telling viewers that it was punishment for breaking gang code. At one point in the footage, a man, believed to be the gang's leader, could be heard saying, quote, "This is what happens to those who steal drugs from me." For 5 days, the young women were officially missing, but on September 24th, that changed when their bodies were discovered buried at a property in the same suburb where they were killed. The gruesome discovery quickly led to a nationwide outcry. Families and neighbors described the killings as inhuman, with Brenda's father, Lionel, telling reporters that the abuse inflicted on his daughter made it impossible for him to identify her body. Her grandfather, Antonio, added, quote, "You wouldn't do what they did to them to an animal." By September 26th, officials announced the arrests of at least 5 suspects, 3 men and 2 women, who were now accused of involvement in the crime. Among them were the couple who owned the property, as well as 2 people accused of trying to clean up evidence afterwards. However, it appears this number has only grown in recent days. Another pair, named Victor Sotacuro and his niece, Florencia Ibanez, were arrested after allegedly helping with transport. All of those in custody are facing charges of triple homicide, qualified by premeditation, and gender-based violence. Despite the wave of arrests, what everyone really wants to see, though, is the mastermind behind what happened here brought to justice. And it appears police have made some progress. Investigators say they believe the person responsible for organizing all of this is a 20-year-old Peruvian national named Tony Valverde Victoriano, better known by the alias Little J. Police say Little J was found and captured after fleeing back to Peru, along with his 28-year-old lieutenant, Matias Agustin Osorio. The men were arrested following an Interpol red notice and are now awaiting extradition back to Argentina. While it appears some, including members of the victims' own families, are questioning whether Little J is really the mastermind, police say they believe they have their man and that the investigations are ongoing. Authorities have also since released grainy surveillance video that shows the victims waiting on a street corner and getting into the vehicle that drove them to the murder scene. After news of the crime spread across the country, thousands of people gathered in Buenos Aires on September 27th and 28th to demand justice. Marching with signs displaying the names and photos of the victims, protesters called for stronger protections for women and accountability from the state. The situation is still developing. The members of a small community in Ireland have been left stunned and searching for answers this week after a beloved couple and their special needs son were found murdered in their home, and the man arrested for the heinous crime is said to be the couple's other son. The awful incident began shortly before 10 a.m. on September 29th, when police were called to a home in the town of Drumgowna in County Louth. The property belonged to husband and wife, 54-year-old Mark and 56-year-old Louise O'Connor. Police were contacted by an employee at a local care center called The Hub. The worker said they'd gone to the O'Connor residence, just as they did most weekdays, to pick up Mark and Louise's 27-year-old son, Evan. Evan was autistic and had been attending a day program at the facility for nearly a decade. However, that morning, what the employee found was absolutely horrifying. Evan, Mark, and Louise were all dead at the property. While little has been released about the details of what was found there, authorities say it was obvious once they arrived that they were dealing with a triple homicide. According to police representatives, the scene was incredibly violent. There was also evidence that Mark and Evan had tried to run and get help. According to some local news sources, their bodies were discovered on the driveway, while Louise was inside in the kitchen. Not long after arriving at the scene, the situation got even darker when police made an arrest in connection with the killings. The person arrested was 31-year-old Robert O'Connor, Mark and Louise's other son and Evan's older brother. At least one witness reportedly saw Robert leaving the crime scene covered in blood that morning, telling them, quote, "I'm sorry for all the screaming and shouting. It's over now." Because it's still quite early into the investigation at the time of this recording, unfortunately, no information has been released about why Robert allegedly did what he did. It seems that's what everyone is now trying to figure out, especially those who lived in the area and knew the O'Connor family well. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues had nothing but kind things to say about the family, who they described as well-liked and beloved members of the community. And Mark was a regional manager in Ireland's National Advocacy Service, which supports adults with disabilities. In fact, much of Mark and Louise's lives seems to have been devoted to improving the lives of people like their son Evan. Not only did they help to set up one of the first dedicated special needs schools in their area back in 2003, they took part in all sorts of charity and volunteer work and were said to be extremely generous with their time. Evan's loss has been felt just as deeply, especially by those who worked at the care facility he attended. In a statement, the Hub wrote, quote, "Evan, our little buddy, was nothing short of a bright shining star, loved and adored by all the staff." They went on to describe him as a, quote, "bright, jolly young man with so much to offer life," noting how he was always singing and, quote, "had a knack for one-liners that never failed to make people laugh." The crime is an extra gut punch because only days before their murders, Mark and Louise had celebrated their anniversary. The couple had been married for 33 years. At the time of this recording, Robert O'Connor remains in custody and has officially been charged with murder. He is currently awaiting a psychiatric assessment. Hey there. Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Luke and I are so grateful for our incredible Crime Zone community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help Crime Zone continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to support the channel, there are a couple of options. We've got a thriving community over on Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. Head over to patreon.com/crimezone to learn more and to meet some of the awesome people whose names are currently on screen. If that isn't your thing, we've also now launched channel memberships so you can join directly here on YouTube. Channel members get a lot of the same perks as on Patreon, including extra content, without the added hassle of having to go off-platform. Now, that being said, we know times are tough and that not everyone is able to support financially. Regardless of your situation though, we want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.